What's going on, guys? Brett0331. We got a live stream for you tonight, and we got a rather small panel, but I'll go ahead and introduce them. We got John with our naval intel update tonight. So his Instagram, as you guys can see, Poseidon _ twice, S2. Be sure to check him out. But John, thanks for jumping on tonight.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's always fun.
It's always a pleasure having you on, brother. And then old trusty Les with Pegasus Test. That is his YouTube channel. Be sure to check him out. So that is our panel tonight, guys. I'm sorry if you were expecting more, but this is what we got. This is what we're rolling with. So
we can handle this.
I'm sure we can. All right, John, you got our maritime intel update, and we haven't had one of these in a while, so we got high hopes.
No. Let me.
You got the con, brother.
Let me remember how to do this. Let's see here. I gotta share my screen, and we're gonna do. Hold on one second. Just bear with me, fellas. All right. So you should be seeing a sat image.
There we go.
Okay. So where we let's recap where we last left off. Last time I was with you guys, we talked about the attack on Sevastopol shipyard that targeted a Rapucha class landing ship and a submarine. Both were struck by Storm Shadow missiles. So since then, just to back things up, so that was September 13th. September 22nd, the Black Sea Fleet HQ was attacked in Sevastopol, with some of the Russian Navy brass being killed in that. Fast forward to November 4th, there was a Karakut-class corvette that was in Zaliv shipyard in Crimea that was struck by a Storm Shadow missile. November 10th, the Project 11770 landing craft. So that's like a standard, like a landing craft with a ramp. You know what I mean? That you put vehicles on. That was attacked, as well as a Project 1176 landing craft, similar sort of build in Vezuka Bay, also in Crimea. With that in mind, there's been talk of, I've been looking at this as shaping operations in the Black Sea to make naval operations in the Black Sea untenable for the Russian Navy, and to push supply lines for an overland route to the north. So in that, with that backdrop of all those events that have happened in the Black Sea, on October 5th, the Russian Federation announced that they were going to be expanding a naval base in Abkhazia in Georgia. And that's what we're looking at here in the SAT imagery. So this is a recent shot. They got this one on October 21st. And this is the facility that they're looking to expand. So we can see here to the north of the image, this is a coal terminal. So commercial ships come in here and they load coal. And then in the south portion here of the image, we have what is a Russian border guard base. It's FSB. So there's some patrol vessels down here. We can zoom in some. And this is what they're looking to expand. So on the face of it, they're going to need to do some expansion here to get anything larger. But as it sits, this base can accommodate a Admiral Grigorovich class frigate, which they do have in the Black Sea, with the draft about 13 feet. So they could get some of their fighting ships in here for sure. But as you can see here with just these patrol vessels, their pier is pretty much full up. There's also some old wrecks in here that would need to be cleared. So still, I don't know if you can see that, but there's a wreck right in here, just sitting below the water, and there's a wreck over here. Right over here, and this is because what we're looking for is signs of construction or excavation that they were expanding the base. There is a pylon barge here with possibly an excavator for dredging. That's generally what they would use this for. But I think that this little port is probably subject to silting. So they're probably always having to maintain the banks to keep it wide, to keep it deep, to get these ships in and out. So I don't know that this is necessarily a sign of any imminent expansion. more as this is just maintenance, essentially. But I mean, as you can see, the base here is, is functional, is fairly new. Things look fairly well kept, in the base itself. But yeah, going to be some time before they get any of their larger vessels in there. Although they could if they can move some boats around or what have you. Another thing I do want to mention is let me just see here, November 6th. So this is in the backdrop of all these attacks happening in Crimea. November 6th, Russia announced the construction of a rail line from Rostov-on-Don into Crimea, so overland route. Again, I think this is further signaling that they're beginning to realize that kind of the Black Sea is a denied area for them. And yeah, that is the intel report.
Where'd you say that was again?
That's in the Republic of Georgia and Abkhazia. So Abkhazia is a breakaway region of Georgia, pro-Russian.
Is that what they were fighting over?
2008. Yeah, 2008. It's 2008 and also 1998. Maybe I could be wrong on the, but more than once they fought over it. And yeah, so it's something I'm watching, and I'm curious to see maybe in 6 months if anything starts, if the needle starts moving over there and what's going on. But as of right now, all quiet. It's just talk. But it does make sense because I think the Crimean Peninsula is kind of being untenable for naval operations for them. You'll see we've seen them pull their vessels out of Sevastopol and consolidate everything in Novorossiysk, which is Russian territory, and even there they're not really safe. I mean, we've seen attacks happen in Novorossiysk as well. So it's just geography. It's everything. They're close. They are neighbors, and they're within range of these cruise missiles. So I think moving, the idea of moving a base into Abkhazia, which is a breakaway region, it's autonomous, but it's also technically part of Georgia. It complicates things, I think, for if the Ukrainians wanted to carry an attack there. You know what I mean? It is involving a third player. So I don't know if that was part of the angle as well, to give the Russians an extra degree of separation. But yeah.
So John, I noticed that most of the ships you listed off there were amphibious type ships. Do you think that is by design, or they were just merely targets of opportunity?
No, I mean it's certainly. I mean, there's certainly targets of opportunity, but the logistics ships. I mean, less. Logistics wins wars. It's key to winning wars anyway. So again, putting that kind of stranglehold on them where they can't move equipment from, say, Novorossiysk or wherever into the Crimean Peninsula, get it into the fight, forcing them to go by rail, which presents its own challenges to protect. I mean, we've seen Russian rail lines being struck, even in the eastern parts of Russia. So it's again, I guess a type of shaping operation, but I think you guys would probably know more about that than me even.
Well, it is interesting. By taking out the amphibious assets, it goes a long way towards removing the threats on Odessa, which then would allow Ukraine to reestablish its shipping lanes out to the Bosporus.
Yeah, that's interestingly though. I mean, we're still seeing strikes, we're still seeing missile attacks on the on the grain terminals in the Danube and even in Odessa. Drone strikes as well, Shahed drones as well. So it's a mess down there right now. But yeah, I think that the Russian Black Sea Fleet the Russian Navy and I've said this before, as mighty as it is been reduced to whatever's in the Black Sea. And they're kind of hamstrung, and that presents all kinds of problems. They can't project power in there, and that's pretty good considering Ukraine is a country basically without a navy. Basically,
John, have
you they've lost the naval battle to a guy who has no ships.
Yeah,
and so the Black Sea Fleet, would you agree, is just essentially now a fleet in being?
Yeah, no, exactly, in name only. They can't put to sea. Not without substantial, taking on a substantial risk.
John, have you seen any like Chi-Com ships coming into any of those docks?
I have not. No Chi-Com ships yet. I am working on a Chi-Com product though, not in the Black Sea, but I'm working on a Chi-Com product. I'll have that for you in a couple of weeks.
I think it's going to be pretty hard for the Chi-Coms to do anything in the Black Sea because the Turks have the Bosporus pretty heavily locked down.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I've seen some satellite pictures of Russian ships calling North Korean ports and things like that. I've seen Russian ships calling Chinese ports, and I mean we've talked about it a little bit. So the Lady R, so she called the Chinese port a few months ago, made her way all the way back to the Suez Canal, got hung up in the Suez Canal for like 3 weeks, turns around and heads back to Vladivostok, where she is. The last time I looked for her, that's where she was. But to think about that, you think about geographically where Vladivostok is and where China is, for them to have to go all the way to Suez to turn around and basically go back to where they came from. There's a reason for that, and I think that's because the Black Sea is becoming a denied territory. So whatever they loaded, they're probably putting on rail and they'll rail it across Russia. I guess they feel like that's safer for them.
Very interesting.
The Russians have always been real dependent upon rail.
Yeah,
correctly.
Oh yeah, that was one of the things that allowed the Germans to fight the delaying actions as much as they did during the Second World War retreats, is because they would just tear up the rail systems.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Do you have any Chi-Com intel? That's always my favorite, man.
I mean, we can talk about some stuff. I don't have anything to show you, unfortunately. But there's if you go to the page, there is a product up right now of a Navy base, a submarine base that was built in Bangladesh by Chinese construction, Chinese money. So it's just something. It's just something that's interesting to me. I think back to how the Chinese got their foothold in the Horn of Africa. So they built a container port there. They built their Navy. They got to put their Navy base there. I'm sure sooner or later that container port will become their container port. And I'm curious to see how this submarine base plays into that overall, that sort of naval policy for China. If China gets to use it or not. Yeah.
Have subs been a big ship product for them that they've been building? I mean,
yeah, I'm not. I haven't been tracking Chinese sub builds. To be perfectly honest, the Bengali Navy has, so in this base, the Bengali Navy has 3 Ming class submarines that call there. So these are Chinese submarines that they've exported. So, people, it's their defense export industry, but it's interesting. The port is built to take base ostensibly to support a Chinese submarine. So not to say that they couldn't get their subs in there. So we'll just see. I haven't seen any Chinese subs call that port yet. I haven't seen anything out of the ordinary, but it's interesting that's who built that port. I've got an eye on Chinese roll-on roll-off ships, and that's kind of interesting because China seems to be ramping up their roll-on roll-off ship production, and we're seeing
what exactly is that? Can you explain what that is?
So a roll-on roll-off ship is basically a ship that carries vehicles, and it's got a stern ramp. So not unlike an amphib, I guess, but no well deck. You know what I mean? So you get wheeled vehicles on there, and then they're designed to, you go into the port, they drop the ramp, and then the vehicles roll off. What's interesting about the new ships that are being built is that the mechanism for which the ramps are controlled by, so these hydraulic rams, we're seeing beefier rams, bigger hydraulic rams, and that's to suggest that they want to be able to make a long story short, they want to be able to launch vehicles at sea. So think amphibious wheeled vehicles, tracked vehicles, right? So this way, that it keeps them from having to get into the port. They can just drop their ramp, and these vehicles can roll off into the sea, and then can conduct their amphibious.
So basically, they're making their own MPF ships.
Yeah, exactly. The Chinese Navy is interesting too because, while they do have a sea lift capability, I think it's it's not as built in as it is built. I should say it is built in, but in a different way. So they have the Chinese Maritime militia, which consists of fishing boats, even that act as like pickets, and they can get in the way. A lot of times you'll see videos on YouTube of U.S. Navy oceanographic research vessels, and they'll get in there and they'll throw their nets out and try to foul the props of these ships. So, they have an interesting way that they project power in the region. But for right now, Chinese Navy is still a regional player. They're not, while they are expanding into Africa, right? They're still a regional player, but that could change. They're certainly trying to change that.
Yeah, I mean, I get part of why they have the base in the Horn of Africa. A lot of nations have a base in Djibouti, because of the whole piracy thing, and China's dependent on a lot of oil that comes out of there. The submarine base is interesting because they built it, but they've shown no inclination to use it yet.
Yeah.
Although, that could change. Usually it might just be they're building it to have a place to go, because for the benefit of our listeners, that's if it's sitting up in Bangladesh, nobody can close off the Straits of Malacca to them if they already have their submarines pre-positioned there. And that then becomes a major threat to the Indians, who are the predominant naval power in that ocean next to us.
Well, yeah, that base that was built for the Bengali Navy. So it was built for the Bengali Navy, just with Chinese expertise in construction. So not necessarily their base, but like I said, I guess what I mean to say is maybe we'll see a port call from a Chinese ship one of these days there. Let's look at this question here. Yeah. So So the question was, what are the odds that China will use a financial downturn collapse for deliberate or not, for using merchant ships for military purposes, and how would you tell if it's happening? So I think the first thing is the merchant navy, the merchant marine, is sort of a paramilitary organization in that in times of war, they're folded into the Navy. They augment the Navy. The U.S. Navy has a huge tradition of this. The Liberty ships during World War II, and then of course with Military Sealift Command today, which is all of your all your fleet underway replenishment and combat support at sea. That's all civilian crewed merchant marine. Now, granted, those are Navy gray-hulled ships, so they are actually Navy ships, but merchant marine crewed. But to the question, I think he wants to know about civilian ships. Absolutely. I don't know that the use of a financial downturn or collapse would be used for a cover for using vessels as military purposes. But I think in the case of China, and I don't know if this answers the question, I hope it does, but in the case of China, I think what you'll see is commercial shipping in the region sort of drying up, and then market rates for those, like daily hire rates for those ships, rising. So basically China calling their commercial ships home, taking them out of the market because they need them for military operations. And in doing that, there's going to be less supply, which is going to make the daily rates, so like say a ship trades at $20,000 a day, that, maybe it's going to go up to $40,000 a day. So there's going to be less supply of ships in the region. Ships are kind of migratory and cyclical. They're traded almost like a commodity unto themselves. So, there are certain types of ships in certain parts of the world at certain times of the year. And so we can see that happen. I think for me, that's the tripwire, to know that, okay, maybe China's getting ready to make a move against Taiwan because they need all the sea lift support they can get. And if they recall their Chinese flagships home, if they call them home, we're gonna see that in the form of sort of like less supply of ships and higher rates. And I think people are going to be wondering where all these ships going. There's no sneaky way to do it. I think it's going to be kind of obvious when it happens.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned that before, that an invasion would be telegraphed because they'd start calling those civilian vessels back to be repurposed for the invasion. Yeah.
There's a question here about does the U.S. have a merchant marine anymore? We sure do. So we have a U.S. flag fleet. It's tiny, or I shouldn't say it's tiny, but it's not as big as other countries. U.S. flag. we have what's called the Jones Act here in the States. So that means, U.S. flagship, U.S. built, American crewed, and that causes an increase in costs. So that's, we're not as competitive because of that. But as a merchant mariner, I am grateful for the Jones Act, because I know what other guys, I know what Indian crews make, and they don't make what U.S. sailors make. So it is what it is, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
there's definitely a difference in rates.
Yeah, there's a difference in rates. Yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, no, we do. And then a large part of the U.S. Merchant Marine lies in the military Sea Lift Command and these combat support vessels, which a lot of people I don't even think realize exist. But it's a neat little facet of the service, I guess.
Hey, we'll come back to this question. So I just want to point that out.
Okay.
So, what do you think about the recent exercises that the Chinese have done with the Russians, where they deployed their carrier battle group based around the Shandong?
Yeah, I to be honest, I have not been following that as close. I have been following I'll say this, just an off the cuff, kind of like a hot take. That's gunboat diplomacy, power projection. It's sending a message, right? That's what's cool about. That's what's cool about navies and ships. I'll tell a story. I was on a fleet oiler in the South China Sea, and we were cruising past the Spratly. We were doing freedom of navigation operations in the vicinity of the Spratly Islands, and we were with a destroyer and it was a couple of destroyers and ourselves, just the oiler for the group. And of course, Chinese frigate comes out. And you can see them on the horizon. They raise the flag. See the little red flag on the horizon, and they start hailing us on the radio. And then at one point, the U.S. destroyer, and this Chinese destroyer start talking to each other. And it was interesting, the conversations that were being had. All on an open net. But it was just interesting, and I was like, okay, this is sort of like diplomacy on the high seas kind of thing. And it was just an interesting thing to see. But that's what navies are for. That's that power projection element, and that's that. Yeah.
What's going on with the Houthi rebels shooting on?
Yeah. So the Houthis have captured some ships. Most recently was that car carrier. And they said it was an Israeli-owned car carrier. There was an Israeli interest tied to the ship, but the ship itself is not Israeli owned. And that's the thing with shipping, like the ownership chains of these things is so convoluted, but they figured out somewhere down the line that this guy, that's involved with the ship, trading the ship, was Israeli. So they took the ship, but the crew is like Ukrainian and Filipino or whatever, Indian, excuse me. And, now they're guests of the Houthis for the Yemenis for the moment.
John, don't you find it's a little strange about that ship seizure that no one's bitching?
It's interesting, and also I heard, or I should say, I read that there were Chinese naval vessels in the vicinity too, and this comes back to the Chi-Coms for Brent, but they failed to act while these civilian ships were being attacked. This was last week while the USS Carney, I believe it was swatting these things down and kind of in the fight. But the Chinese vessels, they stayed radio silent and didn't alter their course to assist. So I think that's kind of telling, to be honest.
Yeah, I've found this whole thing in the Red Sea to be very interesting. One, because unless the ship's dead empty, which isn't a complete possibility, but a car carrier has high value cargo on it,
Yes.
And usually a crap ton of it. That's a lot of money tied up, because usually that kind of commodity is payments tied to delivery. Well, delivery is not happening. There's people not getting paid oodles and oodles of money, and everything's entirely too quiet out there. Insurance rates aren't changing. Nobody's being bellicose politically. Nobody's doing any blatant maneuvers off the port. It's really kind of strange.
Yeah, I mean, I think, maybe the insurance rates are slow to react. I've seen it in my day-to-day work now for ships transiting the Red Sea. We're getting hit with owners really anxious about making sure we're putting this, and this to me is funny actually, but they're really anxious about hardening the ship, so hardening materials and putting armed guards on board, and things of that nature. And of course, the insurance, paying the insurance, getting the insurance premiums for war risk or what have you. What's interesting though is, there was an interesting conversation going on in the office about armed guards and what would they do. A lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of private security contractors with their armed guards, if the ship gets boarded, they retreat to the citadel with the rest of the crew. They won't get into a CQB kind of fight with these pirates to get them off the ship once they're on board. They'll do their best before they board, but generally speaking, they retreat to the citadel and hide with the crew if they get on board. That's not to say every maritime security company is like that. I know of a few. I should say I know of one definitely that they basically said we're not going to do that. So they have no intention of hiding from the pirates, which I think is cool, because that you're paying these guys a lot of money to not take your ship and then have them hide. This was an American outfit. I'll just say that much with that sentiment. But a lot of European and Asian outfits, that's kind of like, oh well, we'll go by IMO guidelines, which is to retreat to the citadel with the rest of the crew. That being said, the conversation in the office was, well, if we put armed guards on, they're gonna somehow. There's a false sense of security because the Houthis are like a semi-state actor. You know what I mean? The same thing. This conversation got tossed around when Iran was seizing ships in the Straits of Hormuz, and like, oh well, what could the armed guards repel this boarding from Iran? And I kind of had to sit there, and I said, well, look, you're talking about a private security company getting in a gunfight with Iran. That's not going to happen, right? They're not a government. They're not a navy. So it's the private security contractors are good. It's sort of a band-aid, and I could get on a soapbox about this, but it's sort of like a problem that nobody really wants to fix, and it's kind of nobody cares. It's a check in the box for the risk assessment and the insurance company, unfortunately.
The thing about that though is like I know several dudes that have done like military contracting, security contracting, right? And they're not the kind of guys that even if the company says, "Hey, if they start to board the ship, fucking fall back to the city."
Well,
It's going to be one of those things like.
So what's fun? Well, so yes, and that's why I specifically said, so like the American outfits are basically offline. They'll say that to you. Our guys aren't fucking surrendering any pirates. That's what they'll say to you, and I believe it actually with the American outfits. But you're like, there's a lot of like there's Indian outfits, there's Singaporean outfits. I don't have so much faith in those guys. I think that they are gonna fucking turn tail and run. I do. But they say they're gonna do it, and I believe it. So. I can't speak for the British. I can only say what I've heard from the American outfits, and I believe it. And kind of their opinion is like, we're Americans, and if we get captured, what do you think is going to happen to us? And that's kind of the attitude. So they're not getting caught, I guess is the attitude there. But again, in a case like with the Houthis or whatever. Or like a state actor, there's not much they could do, and I'm not sure there's not much they would do. You know what I mean? I feel like their hands would be kind of tied, but I don't know. We haven't seen it yet, so there's always that.
Yeah, what do you think about the Carney and the missile engagement?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty wild to see our DDGs out there, kind of just seeing the reach that they have, right? It's also pretty impressive to see the reach that the Yemenis have, actually. I didn't to see that kind of for what they are and the capability they have. But this isn't the first time this has happened. I can think of a few other times as well, in like the last maybe 7 or 8 years, where where the Houthis lob some missiles at an American ship and we intercept them or what have you. It's the American DDG is a force to be reckoned with. That's for sure.
Well, that's what I thought about interesting. It's like, so the news report is the missiles were launched at Israel. They're cruise missiles. It's kind of at the max extent range of a cruise missile. So I'm wondering, but the Navy released a thing that when the Carney engaged, some were taken out with standard missiles, is what you would expect, but one was taken out with the Sea Whiz, which I found very strange.
Yeah. Well, that was, I guess, yeah. And I don't know. I haven't seen the report or I don't have an inside track on that, but it's to say that they were probably pretty close to wherever that was launched from. It was obviously within the operational envelope of the Sea Whiz, so it was probably pretty hairy. It was pretty hairy. Let's just say that it was pretty hairy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Sea Whiz, and I'm like thinking that's last resort.
Yeah. No. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's within a few kilometers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I was just thinking that's really strange. Of course, if SM2 takes it out, of course it should, because that thing's got stupid long range. But I'm just when they officially said that Department of Navy release said, and one was taken out with the Sea Whiz.
Well, the C in Sea Whiz stands for close. So
yes. That's what I found very, very interesting, and I find it hard to reconcile that, taking out a cruise missile, because it wouldn't be normally in the engagement envelope of that weapon system.
Sure. I mean, you could also maybe attribute that to misreporting too. You know what I mean?
Normally I would, but like I said, that wasn't a Department of the Navy release. It's just
okay.
Not a slip I would think they would make.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So then, they want you to know.
Yeah, that's the point. If NBC said that, who cares? They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But yeah, when the Department of Navy says, they took one down with a Sea Whiz, it's like, that's very strange.
Yeah, I know. Fair enough.
How funny is it that of all the branches of the U.S. military, the U.S. Navy is the one that's getting all the action right now?
Right now, yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
And yet, the thing a Navy captain's most likely to say when he goes into battle is away all borders.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. It's interesting. Historically, you look at a lot of conflicts have started in the maritime domain, though. When you think about it, you go back to the Spanish American. There's some controversy there with the USS Maine. I think we can all agree. But there's a maritime angle there. Pearl Harbor, obviously, a maritime angle there. You've got
World War One with us.
World War One. Exactly. World War One with the Lusitania. You've got, I could go on and on.
Well, from the time of the Barbary pirates, it's shown that you take or sink one of our ships, that never works out well for you.
Yeah,
that's not a good thing to do.
No,
let's kick this around for a second, though. Clearly our ships are getting engaged, and what is being done about that? Like, what has been our response? Have we been shooting fucking tomahawks into the origins of these launch sites? Like, what the fuck is going on? I haven't seen anything on the news in terms of retaliation.
No, matter of fact, I saw a thing with General Keane today saying that we need to absolutely up our game on that respect. But to be fair, all the ship's self-defense systems seem to be containing the threat very well.
Yeah.
It seems that we can do the things we say we can do in that respect.
Right. I get that, power to the U.S. Navy, but payback, right? Like,
absolutely.
I get it. I get that too. I definitely see your point, Brent. But in some ways, you build the ship so they can defend themselves so well that it doesn't lead to a larger conflict. It gives you the out, right? So like, okay, we don't want to deal with this right now or whatever. We don't want to commit anything to this. So luckily, our equipment's good enough to deal with it. Because let's say if the USS Carney did get hit and a couple of sailors died and you took a ship out of commission, we're 100%, I like to think, going to go do something about that. But as long as the Carney keeps swatting them out of the sky, there's no reason, there's no urgency, right, for leadership to escalate. It's gonna take somebody getting hit. That's what I'm saying.
My thoughts are, hey, if you're launching fucking cruise missiles at us, that's active war. So we just, fucking level wherever the hell they firing their missiles or whoever's responsible. And it's like, yeah, do it again, motherfucker. Like, try us.
I don't disagree.
That's my point about the CIWS being used.
Yeah.
The engagement envelope of that weapon system that you can find in open source materials is a point defense weapon. That thing had to be coming at the ship for the weapon to be able to engage it.
Yeah. So it was directly targeted. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well, I definitely want to segue into the border because there's some stuff going on. It's been going on for a while, but big uptick in military age males coming over from all different types of nations, but a lot of Chinese. So I know we've touched on the subject before, but you can't help but wonder, if there's a significant portion of these, military age Chinese males that are coming to the country that are, infiltrators and standing by and waiting for the word.
You certainly would think so. I think unfortunately, I mean, like a lot of them are been being caught or that we're seeing the reporting. I've heard this also too, like, with Hamas, the rumor that, there's Iranian sleepers, right, already in the country waiting for that go, right. But all infiltrating through the, I guess what I'm saying is they're already here. Unfortunately, they've been here for a while. If there are these sleeper cells, like if that's a thing, I'm sure it is. They've been here probably for a long time.
Oh, for sure. Remember they found that Chinese police station?
Yeah.
And what state was it? I can't even remember.
That was in New York City.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
And that was right around the same time. So then, so that was right around the same time. There was an arrest made. It was a counterintelligence based arrest made within the new NYPD. I think it was the 111th precinct. I think so. But anyhow, this guy he was a Chinese American NYPD officer, and he was basically caught giving information and reporting on the Tibetan community within, I guess, in Queens. That's where the 111 precinct is. They're in Flushing, Queens, which is a heavily densely Asian population, Chinese population in New York City. And but anyway, they busted him, and then shortly thereafter, that's also when that Chinese police station got rolled up, which I thought was interesting. And then have you heard about the laboratory they found in California? I mean, it's kind of old news at this point. You haven't heard about this?
No, I haven't. No.
All right. So, Les, have you heard about it?
I heard something about it. I'm not 100% sure what was said. I just heard they found something.
So, yeah. So, the circumstances, exactly how it was discovered, kind of getting away from me. But essentially, I guess the property owner of this building went in there to do a check, and they saw, the place was being operated as a laboratory, and it went to the local police. The local police pushed it to the feds. The feds didn't want to. I guess the feds sent it to CDC. This, that, and the other thing. It got pushed down, and eventually they made enough noise, and the cover on this place was blown. But it was a Chinese operated biolab, and they had Ebola samples at this place. They had, I think there was another thing. There were so they had laboratory mice that were, they were using for testing and all this shit. And it's pretty wild that like all that was going on here in the States.
Unbelievable.
It's weird. It's like that documentary from 1984 about
under our nose.
Infiltrated.
And
you wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Brent?
I'll tell you, man. A couple everything. So it's like we're terrible about planning for the short term, and the Chi-Coms are always planning for not just long term, but like long term. They play the long game. I mean, you look at all their operations, man, how they are restructuring their military, building it up, infiltrating our borders, buying up farmland, fucking secret police departments, police stations in our cities, apparently biolabs. I mean, they are hitting us on all fronts, moving into China, taking over these third world countries and manipulating them, manipulating currency. I mean, God, what the hell are we doing?
I know there was also, let's just throw some fuel on the fire for Brent. There were the Chinese tourists that were out hiking in the vicinity of a U.S. military base, and they got caught, I guess, taking pictures and whatnot. That was fairly recent too. But apparently, again, I talked to some people, and they're like, "Oh, that happens all the time." so I don't know. You know what I mean? It's
yeah, but think of your
much of this world
average
you don't
base.
see. You know what I mean?
Can you really see from the wire?
Sure.
Hell, we got a highway that runs right through the middle of fricking Fort Bragg and Camp Lejeune. And from that highway, you don't see jack shit.
Sure.
So if they're on the outside of the perimeter of the base, what are they really seeing?
Yeah.
Well, dude, I mean, there's several Army bases. Fort Hood is one of them, where like most of the ranges are all off base. I know this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people, but you go off base and fucking go to this large training area off base, and that's where the ranges are.
Yeah, but at the same token, you'll stick out like a sore thumb there unless you're supposed to be there. I mean, the same thing's out with like at 29 Stumps. There's no big fence around that whole place.
Yeah. Did you guys hear about the? So this was last week. This was pretty big news last week. But there was a U.S. diplomat charged with espionage last week.
For the Chi-Coms?
No. So for the Cubans, of all people. but that's like, well, you laugh, but I mean, okay, Cuban intelligence, but where's that intelligence going? It's going to Russia.
Right, yeah, 100%.
But what's interesting though is so this guy, I guess, he's 73 years old. They arrested him, and they say he's been spying for Cuba for the last 40 years. So that's a long. I mean, counterintelligence cases, they're long and they take forever. So that maybe had something to do with it. But I mean, pretty interesting. And when you talk about human intelligence and espionage, the Cubans are actually no joke. So they had an infiltrator back. She got arrested on 9/11/2001. It didn't really make the news cycle then because obviously the attacks happened. But she was working for DIA, and now I just had her name and it's like gone. DIA spy. Hold on. Cuba. It'll come to me. Someone in the chat, throw it out there. Ana Montes. So yeah, Ana Montes, she was spying for Cuba for quite a while as well.
She hot?
17 years. She was spying on behalf of the Cuban government for 17 years. And she was, so she got arrested. But she just got out of jail. She got out of jail like a couple of years ago. Right, last year, I think. So the Cuban intelligence service is actually no joke. You laugh, but yeah.
No, why would it be a joke? It would have been initially trained by the KGB, which was a very effective force. So no, you wouldn't want to underestimate it. But then I wouldn't underestimate any country's intelligence service, because I bet you the guy down there in Guyana is probably pretty good at his job.
Sure, fair enough. I think what's interesting, what's interesting is how aggressive the Cubans are, considering how small of a part they play. I think or the perception is how small of a part they play. But their espionage, they're aggressive in how they prosecute. How they go after stuff and gather intelligence.
Douchebag Brothers Dick brings up a good point. What I saw one of the charges, or one of the actors that Hunter Biden, the countries that he's involved with, was China. So among others like Ukraine and I think Romania were named, but China was a big one. So it's like, what had they been getting via Hunter Biden through other means, right? What kind of secrets have they been acquiring all these years?
Sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be interesting. And do I expect anything to happen at the change of the presidency? No. But at the same token, if we found out everything that Hunter did, I think the whole world would be appalled. But then maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. It must be whatever it is. It must be so nasty that it just must be. It just must be one of those things where it's like, it's just so bad. I don't know. It's probably pretty fucking bad.
Yeah,
it's whatever it is. I mean, that brings, it's like, not to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole, but you think about the Kennedy files, right? The assassin, like that was supposed to be declassified how many times now over the last 5-10 years, and every time it comes out, they push it back, they roll it back. But like you think about it under Trump, that was supposed to come out, and even Trump like didn't push the issue, it seems. So whatever it is, it must be pretty embarrassing. Whatever it is, you know what I mean? There obviously is more to the story, and whatever it is not great. You know what I mean? But it's like also the not knowing lets your imagination wander all manner of things. So it's like, who knows?
Well, and everybody involved in that is dead, right? So what does that tell you? That means the embarrassment comes from an institution, right? So they're protecting an institution, not a person, because the people are all dead and long gone.
Yeah.
So, what institution is that? Let's think about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, did you see the guy in Doc's not here, so I can't make the joke, but there's the guy shooting off flares in Alexandria? Arlington. I had texted. Did you see this?
No.
All right, so
you didn't hear about this? Oh man,
this guy, like, I guess Chinese guy. I don't know. He had like tinfoil on his windows or whatever. And the police responded, I guess, to serve a search warrant, and he was shooting off flares in his house out into the street. And and then his whole house blew up.
Yes. Okay, I saw the video. My bad.
Yeah.
That was wild. That was
wild.
Fucking wild. What's funny about that is, well, not funny, but you see a police armored vehicle like moving towards the house, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know what they were about to do, but obviously they were moving in towards the house, and then that whole
standard Arlington door knock.
But all I can think about are these morons. Remember during the Obama administration, they're like, what do police departments need with armored vehicles? Specifically they're referring to like MRAPs and shit like that. And it's like, well, motherfucker, like, look at that. You know what I'm saying? Like, my understanding is no law enforcement were seriously hurt from that explosion, miraculously. But you see that armored personnel carrier is moving towards the house when that sucker went off. I mean, that sucker blew the fuck up. There like was no house left.
Yeah, there was no house. It was pretty wild.
Basic stoichiometry.
Dude, it was like a JDAM hit it, man. It was just that's wild.
Do you know did it come out like what he did? Did he cut the gas line, or was it just rigged with like?
Well, he had to.
500 pounds of tannerite.
That had to be a gas.
Yeah.
Filled.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's not the first time something like that's happened.
Sure.
Like it's stuff like that's happened accidentally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty wild. I remember watching. You see it because everything happens damn near in real time, right? So that comes in across your stream, and you're like, "What the?"
I mean, that's just one of those things that you're like scrolling through your feeds and stuff, and you see this.
Yes, exactly. That's
and it's like boosh, like
that's exactly. Yeah, that was exactly. I think I was just scrolling through, and then I'm like, well, that's something you don't see every day. Yeah, man. I don't know.
It was just more things. They said it was somewhere between 30 and 40 flares, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a Doc joke in there, but he's not here. He's not here, so he can't really I texted him the next day. I was like, "Were you shooting off flares the other day?" Was that you?
I kind of want to go back to this JFK thing because I see a lot of the comments are still talking about that. So, I mean, I'm not going to dive too far into conspiracy. Obviously, I think most people believe that there's more involved than what the common belief is. I will just say this: being a Texas resident, having gone to the school book depository museum now, you can go to the actual spot. Now, the actual window where the shots were taken is glassed off. You can't go to that, but you can go to the next one over, right, and stand there and look at where that shots were taken. It's not a hard shot.
Sure.
Oh my God! With that scope, his head must have been like a fucking basketball.
Any basic marksman can make that shot. When where the car is going, it's directly in line, and it's like what 100 yards, I think. I mean, it's an easy shot. Like all this talk that you guys hear about, like, oh, it's impossible, dude. It's nonsense, absolute nonsense. So, and people talk about Carcanos being like crappy, right? It was a military rifle. It was not. It's not a crappy rifle. I wish Bruce was on. Bruce loves Italian firearms. His heavy Southern accent. He would come up here and he would talk about fucking Carcanos because he's got one. But anyways, all I wanted to say is it's not a difficult shot. Now, if you want to talk about the speed in which the shots were fired, that's a conversation you can have. And I'm not ruling out the possibility of another shooter. However, I'm just saying that it wasn't an impossible shot. It's a rather easy shot that I think any basically trained Marine, as was Oswald, could make that fucking shot all day long.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that you don't appreciate until, like you've done, right? You go in there and you see that museum. If you don't appreciate it till you stand, and then it makes all sense. And he had a scoped rifle. Like I said, the president's head must have looked like a goddamn basketball in that thing.
Oof.
Oh, sorry. I apparently I had the wrong one. Mannlicher.
Mannlicher Carcano. You had it half right anyway. Whatever. It was a foreign gun.
Potato.
Yeah. All I could think about is the quote from Full Metal Jacket when he's up there speaking. What well-trained Marine and his rifle can do. No, but I highly encourage you. Actually, Grunt Proof, Randall with Grunt Proof, had stopped by my house several months back. He had flew into the East Coast and he was driving back to not Southern California, but up where he lives in Northern California, up in the mountains. And he was just, seeing the states and visiting people along the way. And he told me he was going there. And I told him, I was like, dude, go make sure you go to that window and see the shot for yourself so that like every time you hear people talk about how impossible that shot is, like you'll laugh, right? Because, I mean, it's not, man. It's unbelievably easy. it's laughable every time I see that in like a documentary talking about how impossible that shot is.
They do say it was like an impossible shot. I was down there a few years ago, just kind of driving past. Like I wasn't even meaning to go there. I was just lost, and ended up going right past it. And it looked a lot small. It's a lot smaller and more condensed than I guess you would get from like the pictures.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But I don't know. That'd be an interesting. Forgotten weapons experiment, maybe, with somebody to do it. Let's get the shots off.
Well, I mean, there's been documentaries and episodes. I watched some episode. I couldn't name it for the life of me, but they like recreated the shot, like the angle. They used the same type of rifle, and they even got like the ammunition, same like lot number that was used. And if I remember correctly, they were able to recreate.
So they got like forensic with it. That's interesting.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people have done it. I know Brandon Herrera has done it too. It's like a lot of people have done it.
All right.
It's easily doable, and with the type of ammunition that rifle used, the weird tumbling makes sense.
Fair enough.
What else we got?
What's going on? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, looks like to try to fill in a little for Logan here for 3 seconds. Looks like things over in Ukraine, the Russians keep trying to attack in Artvika, if that's how you pronounce it, and not getting anywhere. There's lots of reports of units getting absolutely decimated, taking 70-75% casualties with nothing to show for it. But at the same token, it looks like the Ukrainians can't exploit anything. So I think at this point in that war, we have hit true stalemate.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't see how it progresses any further. I mean, Ukraine has been attrited personnel-wise. The Russians, I think, ever since their failed initial invasion, they just resorted to solidifying the territory that identifies as being Russian. That's all they really wanted to begin with. So I just don't see how it goes beyond this. I don't see how Ukraine without getting additional bodies, which is probably they're not going to get unless the war widens. They can't launch any major offensives, and it doesn't seem like the Russians are going to. Although I remember Logan talking about, he believes the Russians will launch another offensive. So who knows? Maybe the Russians are waiting for the Ukrainians to be completely attrited, and then they're going to launch their major offensive. But
yeah, each side has a really unique problem, though. The Ukrainians are bodies. They don't have bodies. And right now, I think one of the reasons Western powers are getting a little more reluctant to send stuff is like, how many more Bradleys and Challengers and Archers can you send if there's just nobody there to use them? What difference does it make? On the other side, the Russians seem to have plenty of bodies, but they have severe equipment shortages. It's interesting problems having the same effect, driving each army into basically stalemate for the situation. Neither side can do anything due to their individual problems.
Yeah. Mac 14 puts it's winter. Russians are not in a rush. Time is on their side, and it's absolutely true.
Oh, absolutely. You can say that applies to both sides, though. To be frank, So, will we get a winter offensive? Don't know. Probably not from the Ukrainians if there is one. But then, based on the equipment shortages that the Russians are suffering, not sure they're in a position to mount one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it like Ukraine, I saw an article a month or two back. It's like they have equipment that they can't even man, like some of these tanks and armored personnel carriers. Like, the West has given them shit to use in their war effort, but they don't even have the personnel to man the stuff. So it's like you can get all the aid you want, but if you don't have the bodies to fucking put behind the controller or the steering wheel, it ain't happening. So
no, exactly. That really seems to be the thing. So I can see why some of Western governments are not in a hurry to get more stuff there, because what's it going to do other than possibly get captured?
Right.
And also, I think a lot of Western governments are starting to look at the fact, like the Bulgarians and the Romanians are like, hey, we might need this shit. So they're not in a hurry to get rid of it because, everybody's going to have to expand their armies. And, even a crappy old tank is better than the tank you do not have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what was it? It wasn't the last debate. It was the debate before that. Vivek Ramaswamy brought up. He's like the territory that the Russians have is like the territory that they've held since 2016. So there literally hasn't been much pushback or changing of the line since then, which is insane to think.
So what do you think? Go ahead, Thus.
I was going to say, let's give credit where it's due. I mean, clearly at one point, the Russians went for the whole enchilada with a decapitation strike at Kiev. So credit to the Ukrainians to getting it pushed back to the starting point. Kind of reminiscent of Korea, if you need a historical precedent.
Do you think the linchpin of that not working was the fact that they couldn't take and hold Hostomel Airport?
A big part of it, yeah. I mean, being literally the only airborne operation that's failed since Market Garden. Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a big part of it. But then a big part of them not holding Hostomel was the relief columns just were stalled. Right. I mean, imagine if the Ukrainians had A-10s. Holy shit.
Sure, yeah. I think, too, I mean, when you consider the geography, because they're able to use standoff weapons. I mean, it's interesting how, Russia can use standoff weapons from well inside Russia, right? Because the fight is so close, they're so close to one another. But I guess the point is, even with that, they weren't able to push and project long enough to kind of seize the day, I guess, to simply put it.
Yeah, there's definitely a difference in results between those standoff weapons, between what the Russians deploy and what the Ukrainians are deploying. The Ukrainians seem to be getting good results out of Storm Shadow and ATACMS, but the Russians do not seem to be getting the same results out of Caliber.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting too, though, like just to talk about the Storm Shadows, they get through, like, so the Russian missile defense, Russian air defense. People say a lot, like, oh, it's garbage. Maybe so, but like from what I'm seeing, like, whenever they do one of these, whenever Ukraine launches one of these attacks, like only about 30, and maybe that's a lot. I guess that's a lot. I guess when you're going after one target and 30% of your missiles get through and they hit the target, that's a lot. But when the Russians are hitting at, I don't know, 75, like call it 75%. You know what I mean? The last couple of attacks with Storm Shadows, they 30% of those missiles got through. But I guess miss it by an inch, miss it by a mile. I don't know. Maybe it's not as their air defense isn't as bad as you think. It's just overwhelmed. You know what I mean?
That's the one thing. If you look at the air war over Vietnam, and specifically the air war during Yom Kippur and the war of attrition, the Soviet air defense systems were good, but only when used en masse. Sure. And if you can attrit it enough, and if you're willing to launch 100 missiles to get one through that hits the target, you've still achieved the goal.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. It's the Russians have to be that saying, you have to be right 100% of the time, and the Ukrainians just have to get lucky.
It's just like the Israelis with the Iron Dome, right? It's like Hamas shoots a bunch of dummy rockets, and it's like, they can intercept many of those, but some are going to get through. Like it's inevitable.
That's why. So I guess to maybe pivot a little bit, since you brought it up, Brent, what do you make of the operations, or either of you make of the operations going on in Israel right now?
It looks like the Israelis are doing what they need to do. So I haven't been like studying it like glued to the freaking TV or anything, but it looks like they're accomplishing their major tasks and missions and everything. And it looks like they're starting to pivot down south. You know how they originally pushed most of the Palestinians down south. Well, now it looks like they're wrapping up operations up north, and they're starting to concentrate down south. Yeah. So,
yeah.
They are taking losses in equipment, though. I just recently saw a report that it's estimated the Israelis have lost 88 Merkavas, and that they're bringing some of the Magaks, which is their product improved M60, out of storage.
Did you say 88?
Which makes actual sense.
Did you say 88
Merkavas?
Man, I swear I saw an article that said 20. But
that's a big number, though, because the way the Merkava is designed, that might be 88 tanks taken out of action that once they get through the recovery process will be back in action.
So like mobility.
Because a lot of that tank is designed to take hits, preserve the crew, and then be recovered and repaired.
Gotcha.
That seems really hot.
It's the reports that are out there. Is it true? Is it not? Don't know. But the thing of it is, they're taking losses in their armor. The casualty count is definitely up there, but that's to be expected in mount warfare. I mean, buildings eat people. It's a fact of life.
Right.
Water's wet, buildings eat people. But Israel seems to be willing to pay that price to do what they need to do.
Sure. Well, I mean, put yourself, if you were the prime minister of Israel, like I would 100% fucking, yeah, we're going to take losses. Let's go. It's retribution time. It's fucking, like, I'd be looking at that like it was World War II.
Sure.
That's a mission that needs to be fought, has to be fought.
Oh yeah. And there's the thing, when you do out the math and stuff, it wasn't Israel's 9/11. It was 13 9/11s in proportion.
Right.
So yeah, think if 9/11 was 13 times larger for us.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, did you guys see that where they had those Ivy League fucking college like deans testifying and they were getting grilled? Was that not ridiculous or what? Like,
I don't know about this. You have to fill me in.
So essentially they were just like asking like, hey, if you have students that are openly calling.
I did hear about this. Okay, yeah, I did hear about this. And the anti-Semite, and they didn't know what to do.
And, it's a simple answer, right? Like yes or no.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, it depends on the the totality of the circumstance or whatever they were saying.
Yeah.
They wouldn't say yes or no. And at one point, I think it's the dean of Harvard, which was a black woman. She's asked, like, if somebody was, calling for the genocide of African Americans, would you consider that a violation of your school policy? You know what I mean? I mean, come on. It's so ridiculous how the left has taken these drastic sides. Like, I don't even know where the hell they stand, man. They're like 50-50. Because you even got Bernie Sanders just like saying, Israel, go full force, like continue the war, right? And then you have the opposite spectrum of these people rooting on fucking Hamas. So it's just, it's wild times right now.
It is.
Well, that's what happens when you make your deal with the devil. Because they know if that lady from Harvard sat there and went, oh yeah, it's absolutely 100% wrong, unequivocally, she's got a riot at her school.
Yeah.
Well, one of those
one
of those deans is resigned. I can't remember from which.
Yeah, UPenn dean resigned. Yeah, and I'll give her the benefit of doubt. I bet she went home and said, "Fuck it, man, the pay's not that good." Because think about it, the radical left is at the point, if they'd have unequivocally stated, yes, it is wrong to call for the genocide of the Jewish people, those schools would have rioted, hands down.
Yeah, it's wild though, like how, I don't know, this course has gotten really weird in general, but especially weird here.
Well, it just blows my mind that you have these like, you have these blue-haired lefties that are like stumping for Hamas and Palestine, like cheering them on, and like those people in that part of the world do not support your lifestyle.
Yeah. It's ironic. Yeah. It's very ironic.
It is the biggest, most hilarious thing ever.
Hilariously funny, I agree. Nothing ironic about it, because who said they're 100% have Israel's back no matter what? Donald Trump. So if those people say, yeah, go Israel, they're backing Donald Trump. They would kill their own kids before they do that.
It's unbelievable.
True.
That's what that comes down
to. The conversation, the discourse has gotten so bad. Like, Donald Trump could cure cancer overnight and like fix the economy, and people still have a problem with it.
Well, so the proof of all that was the vaccine, right?
Yeah.
Because remember when Donald Trump had Operation Warp Speed and they were working on the vaccine, like the Democrat candidates were all getting asked, like, would you take Trump's vaccine? They were all like, no, I don't trust it, blah, 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 blah. And the second Biden gets into office, it's like the greatest thing since pockets on jeans. Why would
it's also like the states that are building border walls now, or or putting the barriers in the. I think it was California put the barriers in their river crossing, and
no, that was Brent's Texas.
Well, Texas did it.
Cali ain't doing shit.
No. If I'm not mistaken, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but I thought I heard that California is now doing that. And after they gave Texas all that shit for doing it.
I haven't heard that, but Texas is fighting tooth and nail. Greg Abbott, our governor, put buoys out there. The federal government sued them. They keep getting ruled against them, and Texas keeps filing appeals. So the buoys keep staying. So they're vowing to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. So which I hope they do.
I don't understand. Like whatever you want to come. You're going to come to this country. By all means, come. But like, you still we gotta like know who's coming in. You know what I mean? Like, you just gotta know like who you're letting into your house. And I don't understand why that's such a risky thing to say. You know what I mean?
What the most ironic or ridiculous thing about this is no country in this world has the immigration policies that we have, right? The lenient immigration policy. Go to Mexico. Mexico does not have immigration policies like ours. Like, they have all kinds of restrictions and
red tape.
Shit. It's like we're the only country where it's just like fucking come flood here, blah 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 blah, and
no, the EU is basically the same.
Well, yeah, I mean, with the crisis, like but it's disproportionately allocated, right? So as long as Germany and Brussels are not feeling it, they don't care. That's at least my opinion of the immigration in Europe.
Wasn't that part of the reason though that like the British had Brexit, is that you had all these Eastern European Union countries that were like flooding the UK to work, right? But like Brits weren't going to these other Eastern European because so it was like a one-way streak. So they're like, fuck you guys, taking jobs away from our own people. Like, we're not getting anything out of this union.
Yeah. I mean, if you study Brexit and you have any love of your own country, you see why the Brits did it and stuff. I mean, it was getting so bad that because it's part of the United Kingdom, like, people in Brussels were telling people in the Falklands how much they could fish. I mean, that's how ridiculous it was getting. And then they're telling people, oh, you have to take these migrants who came on a boat and ended up in Italy, and you people in Stornoway, Scotland, have to take all these immigrants that literally increase the size of your village by 30% overnight.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. I'm surprised the British weren't more up in arms over it.
Yeah, but then at the same time, you see, okay, like a country like Italy that gets overrun, because when they come, that's also, that's like a seasonal thing, right? So when they come, they there's a lot of them, but then the EU is nowhere to be found to help out Italy. You know what I mean? Like, there's no one helping them. It's like, oh, sorry, Italy, figure it out yourself, and you're just like, well, what was the whole point of this arrangement then?
Oh yeah, and every country has its anti-EU movement. The British were just the first to follow through on it, but Poland's talked about it, although with the election of their new president today, that's probably going to peter out since he was literally the former president of the EU. And I know what's her name, Maloney down there in Italy, once she got power, she started backing off some of her stances.
Yeah.
But a lot of countries talk about it. I don't think they will. The Scandinavian countries and the Baltic countries like Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, they actually make out by being in the EU, and I can't see Spain actually doing it because Spain is literally dependent on the EU to stay afloat.
Sure. There's definitely some countries, obviously, right, that benefit from it more than others, right? That's obvious. It's interesting when you think when the Brits did it, they kept the pound. They didn't go to the euro, not 100% anyway. You know what I mean? They kept their own currency, whereas everybody else was on.
And they were smart to do it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. It's also interesting to see the games that get played, like how it, like in the States, like one if again with the immigration thing, they'll put a bunch of illegals on a plane and send them up to Martha's Vineyard, during in July. And it's funny because like in Italy did the same thing. So I think it was Silvio Berlusconi. He put them all on a train and he sent them up to Germany. he's like, yeah, go to Germany. Go. And then then the Germans stop the train, and it's funny. They do the same shit. It's just
I
European.
love that, man. I remember when that was like first starting to go on, and you had the New York governor or mayor get up on the news outlets saying like Texas is sending all these illegals here and blah blah blah. It's overrunning our systems, and I remember our governor does a news conference like, I haven't sent any illegals here, but since he's accusing us of doing it, I guess we're just gonna send them there.
That's funny.
What's funny is, man, it's had a big impact. You have New York mayor and all that begging the Biden administration to do stuff because they're getting.
And look what the administration did to him.
Yeah.
As soon as he start making a stink out of it, all of a sudden he's under indictment for campaign finance improprieties. Funny how that happens.
Is Conor McGregor running for Prime Minister of Ireland? Am I reading that right?
Google. Stand by.
I don't know, but he has been very vocal saying that Ireland is essentially at war now.
I remember
they can solve
something.
the migrant problem very easily. Just offer them all a beer. Challenge them to a drinking contest.
Well, I mean, you can just see that this immigration thing is not. It's not uniquely an American issue. Like it's happening all over Europe. All over the Western countries are getting flooded. The makeup of those immigrants will be different, right? So like the Western nations in Europe are getting flooded with, Arab migrants. We're getting flooded with fucking everybody.
Yeah. But interesting fact, in Galway, Ireland, the most common name is Mohammed.
Is that right? That's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
And that attack that started all those things in Dublin, Algerian immigrant, they're 22 years, never worked a day in his life, living on the government dole.
That's unbelievable. I mean, you can understand why those people fucking started rioting there. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah.
How do you live in a country for 20 years as an immigrant living off the government dime? Like, how the hell is that even possible?
Because probably it was an improvement over the situation he's in from Algeria.
I was just going to say your threshold for what's comfortable and not comfortable is totally skewed. You know what I mean? It's all a matter of perspective. You come from a dirt floor in Central Africa, right? And then or wherever you're coming from. I'm not saying that, but just saying. And then you're and then you're just getting by in Europe, but by European standards, that's like, oh man, how could you do that? But it's all just a sliding scale of what your experience and perspective is, right?
Well, the Europeans also do it to themselves. For the most part, yes, every major American city will have a Chinatown. Every area, like the Southwest, everybody everywhere speaks Spanish and everything. But me as an East Coaster can go down there and speak English in any of those places and conduct business.
Sure.
In Europe, they force the migrants into communities, and those communities never assimilate, ever. Like you go into certain ones in Belgium and Sweden, and all the signs are not in the language. They don't speak the language. And for the most part, the security forces don't bother to go there unless they absolutely have to. And when they go there, they go in force.
Yeah. So I recently was a few years ago. went to France, in Paris, and we stayed. The first hotel my wife and I stayed at was in Saint Denis, and it's migrant. It's like the migrant enclave there, right? And we're walking around, and I mean, you felt like you were in. There were no native French, you know what I mean? That you could tell readily, and the whole time it was kind of funny because I was like, man, this place seems really familiar. Like, where have I seen? Why do I know Saint Denis for? Why do I know that? You know, and then come to find out, when the Bataclan terrorist attack happened, that's where they caught all those guys. It was in Saint Denis, and I was just like, oh shit, that's right up the block.
But that's an interesting thing, because like that we're in that area, that area is basically all an immigrant community. They found the link to the people up in Verviers and do some hard web searching and find what the Belgian army did to Verviers.
Yeah.
You know, that's another thing, what they have to do to clean these communities out, because what the Belgians did, even in the worst parts of Chicago and Detroit, we could never do in America, ever.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I hate to say this, but times do not look good ahead of us.
Well, they'll be interesting if nothing else.
Well,
I mean, you see, you know, somebody's asked us to take a look at Venezuela, and that's a great thing to take a look at, because it so dramatically shows what happens when America gets weak.
Yeah.
You know, the world leaders are looking around going, I don't think Joe's going to make it through the next election. If I'm going to do it, now's the time to do it.
Sure.
Because even if Trump's the be-all, end-all savior of everything and makes everything all rainbows, unicorns, and all that shit, by the time he gets there, what's done will be done.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this Venezuela thing kind of plays out. It's sort of something that maybe the Brazilians are trying to talk him off a ledge, but I don't know. He may just go for it. I mean, it's Guyana. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's like, so he's going after Guyana, which is, you know, this teeny tiny little country. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens, and if he gets away with it.
Well, can he do it? Yes, absolutely he can. It's such an overmatch. The Brazilians have moved forces into the area. The Brazilians also haven't fought a real war since the Second World War, when they sent forces to Italy to help us. Although their police forces have a lot of experience in the favelas, so it's not exactly an untrained force they'd be sending in.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say they have experience fighting a different type of. It's just a different type of. Maybe not like they've never done a large scale conventional thing in a long time. Let's say operation.
Yeah.
Whereas,
but then
the urban unconventional
Venezuela?
warfare, well, that's true too. Yeah, that'd be, that's interesting too. When we were talking about the Merkava tanks, how much of this stuff is not, how much of it you realize isn't necessarily combat tested, or not combat tested in a near peer way. So you don't have an accurate perspective of what the equipment's capability actually is, or
John,
survivability.
be careful. You're talking about Les's baby here.
Oh, sorry.
I'm agreeing with what John says. I mean, since the invention of the Merkava, it never has gone up a near peer enemy.
I'm just saying in general, though. You know what I mean? Like, for all the equipment that we've built, you know what I mean, during the Cold War, right? Like, I mean, all of it. Things have been put into the field, into use. Us more than anybody else, but very seldom do you see it, in a near peer fight or wherever, in an actual fight, and then you say, okay, a lot of this performance was maybe theoretical, and now we're actually seeing what this looks like in the real world. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's a bad tank.
No, and, it's one of the things about Desert Storm that, one of the significant effects of that war was the United States proved that we could do everything we say we could do. Our stuff worked. I wish Doc was here because he could back this up. But like growing up in the 80s, if you watched a news report on an American weapon system, it was garbage. It didn't work. One of the great jokes of Desert Storm is, we've shot down the Scud Saddam doesn't have with the Patriot missile that doesn't work. You know, Patriot didn't work. You know, the M1 tank was garbage. The Bradley was crap. And yawn and on and on and on. Tomahawk doesn't work. And you know, all that shit worked great.
Sure.
You know, works a lot better than its Russian stuff. You know, and we were fed during the Cold War that, you know, when the Israelis would cut big swaths through Soviet armor with technically outdated tanks, and everybody's like, oh, well, you know, that's the export monkey models they give foreigners, you know, the real stuff's better. No, it's not. You know, a Russian T-72 is no really much different than an Iraqi T-72. It gets hit, it brews up.
Yeah.
You know, and the big deal they're making in the news right now about finally a Challenger tank was killed in Ukraine. Yeah, because it's the first chance it came up against a situation where it could be.
Yeah, when your sample size, right? Exactly. It's not at that stage. What kind of data point is it really? You know, but it's interesting. Like I said, even with China, right? For everything that everyone says about China, it's all theoretical. They haven't had a major conventional engagement since maybe the 60s. Did they do something?
1979 against Vietnam, and they got their asses handed to them.
Yeah. So you think about and I've said this before. I think here, like the United States has always had a pool of cadre of leadership that's been a war. Like at some point, maybe we went through a bit of a dry spell in the 90s, but you still had guys, I guess, that they did Vietnam, right? So those guys maybe they're still hanging around. Like there was still some knowledge base there. Whereas other places, they have huge gaps in that knowledge base. You know what I mean? Generations, even. So I don't know. Just a thought.
Oh, they probably have no people who were in and around during that Sino-Vietnam War.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but even then, like that's a completely different military. Like even the way they were structured and stuff back then. Like they used to have like I'm trying to remember. I think they didn't have like NCOs. They just had like a political commissar or something attached. Like they didn't have ranks. It was just, you know, your political comments. It was a fucking weird setup. So they've completely restructured. I remember watching this video where I want to say it was some British officers went to a Chinese military army, like OCS essentially, and they were like, yeah, they've modeled a lot of this shit off of like Western like style in terms of like how they do their training.
Yeah, and you know, it's like, and John, you might be able to speak to this. Like, you look at the Chinese Navy; they're clearly copying stuff. I mean, look at pictures they put about their aircraft carriers. Their deck crews look like exact copies of ours, down to the cranials they wear and the color coding they use to design jobs. But it's like a musician. You can imitate the song on the radio, but can you read the music on the sheet?
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and I think China imitates things. They don't know how to employ them. And this goes back in their history. If you look at the Second World War, the Chinese always massively outnumbered the Japanese, yet didn't really perform well against them. You look in the Korean War, the relatively, in the scope of things, few U.S. soldiers there, yet the horrendous casualties we inflicted on the Chinese. Just look at what our brother Marines did at Chosin. The casualties they inflicted were absolutely devastating. The Chinese fight Vietnam in '79. None of these situations does this lead to great victories for China.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't what was happening on mainland China that contributed to Japan's downfall in World War II. You know, they fought to a standstill in Korea when you could make the argument we didn't show up to play that hard. And then, you know, against the Vietnamese in '79, although I would imagine in 1979, there's a lot of combat experience in the North Vietnamese army going up against us. But even still, you know, they fought the Chinese to a standstill.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's interesting. It is interesting. I mean, and like what you said about they copy our equipment, you know, and so there's the one thing is, okay, the Chinese have a variant. They have a facsimile, a copy of the Black Hawk. They've got a copy of the E-2C Hawkeye. They got a copy, I think, of a P-3, Orion.
Yep. They literally copy it.
Yeah, they copy it. But at the same time, you know, open it up. Is it as good? I don't know. I'm going to say probably not, but what do I know? That's just maybe my own bias. Then
Well, it's a double-edged sword. Like, look at this. Like examples. Are Holosuns good red dots? Yeah, they're probably some of the best out there. Sometimes when you copy some stuff, you figure a way to make it better.
Sure.
But we look at Chinesium, and not always, not everybody thinks having their Chinesium thing is the best thing to have.
And I think the other point I would make is the individual operator. You know what I mean? You take a fast race car, right? Take a winning race car. Take a Ferrari Formula One car, right? Put one driver in it, and he's gonna do great in it. You put another driver in it, it's not, it doesn't matter. You might as well have a go kart. If you can't drive, you can't drive, right? So it's like there's that skill and just that individual operator skill, I guess, and aptitude.
This is a good point right here. China has a serious population imbalance and needs to lose about half their young men. So they definitely have more military age male men that don't have wives.
Well, this is the big thing, right? Because people are saying, well, basically China's got to do this sort of thing in the next 5 to 15 years if they're going to do it. And it goes to be because of their population imbalance and what that's going to do to the economy. They have a rapidly aging population with no one to take care of those people. You know what I mean? They have a lot of weird, really unique issues due to the policies they've enacted, right? So, there's that. I read something about there was a type of bird that was in China that was, I guess, eating something. They didn't like this bird. So they go out and they kill it. Basically, there's a decree that goes out and they kill this bird. They wipe it out. And then, they had a famine because the locusts all came because this bird was there to, kill the locusts or whatever. And that was and it was like a 50-year famine or something like that. So it's like these things, like this sort of butterfly effect of events,
Well, do we have any other topics we can discuss before we wrap this up? Anything else going on in the world that we haven't hit yet? What do you guys got in the comment section? Throw it out there. Somebody says that was Mao's War on the Sparrows.
Yeah, that's it. That's what. Yeah. That's what it's called. Yeah.
Somebody says, how much ammo is everyone stacking for the coming conflict?
That's
none of your business.
I'll tell you this: you should have bought it at least during the Trump administration. If you didn't stock up then, I don't know what to tell you, buddy. So you should have.
If you're looking to buy now, you screwed up.
You should have bought your war stockpile fucking then. And then, that way you're only buying training ammo going forward. Right. So.
It's only money. Buy it. Buy it now. Fuck it. You're going to work on Monday, right? So.
Okay, Yemen interdicting the Red Sea. It is an interesting thing. Our administration has shown us not to strike back at the Houthis, which conducted a helicopter boarding of a merchant ship, so that's a quasi-governmental action. Yeah. But I think as long as ships' self-defense systems are working and we take no casualties, I don't think we're going to do anything more than we have done.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you guys think? What do you say, Les?
I'd be what I have been. I'd stay in my own time frame.
I'm a nobody, so I'll comment. World War II. I don't know. Yeah, I think World War II. Paratrooper.
I would. Yeah, for me, it would be a toss up between a Marine in the Pacific during World War II or Vietnam. So. What else we got, guys? Don't let us down.
Do you guys see the video? The Hamas video of the basically it was a Hamas fighter popping up in the middle of an Israeli patrol base.
No, I have not seen that one.
It's pretty spooky actually. So
Damn.
he's in a ton. Yeah, he's in. I'll find it. I'll send it to you. But yeah, he pops up and he's in the middle of a patrol base, and
shit!
I mean, like right in the middle of it. You know what I mean? And this guy.
Was it like he planned to do it, or was it like one of those oh shit moments where both sides look at each other?
No. The Israelis, from at least in the video, from the clip, because it's a short clip, doesn't look like anybody noticed him. So he's like well inside of this thing, and I mean you could see the guys smoking and joking, they're sitting around, they're hanging out. You know what I mean? So the pretty spooky though. I mean he just pops up and he's there, and then what was it? Have you guys heard anything about them flooding the tunnel? The Israelis flooding the tunnels? I saw a video, but I don't know, and I have no other context for it than the video that I saw.
The news reports are kind of all over the place. Like if you watch them last week and the week before, it's like the Israelis had already done it.
Sure.
But now it's more like they're getting ready to do it.
Interesting.
So I don't know, but I admire the tactic, but I think one thing that would hold me back if I was the Israelis, now that I more think of it, we know these tunnels extend into Israel, and you're going to do massive damage to the aquifers filling those tunnels full of salt water. And that might be such long-term damage that would even affect Israel that may not be worth doing.
Sure. Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting take. And then also, I don't know how many hostages still remain in Hamas hands, but
another tactic would be interesting. The Marines in I Corps in Vietnam, when they found a tunnel complex, would just fill it full of smoke.
Sure.
Just to see where the smoke came out.
Yeah, and the Soviets in Afghanistan, wouldn't they just carbon monoxide bomb a cave set network basically?
Yeah.
Just hook fill it with exhaust. I guess there's other ways to crack that nut, I guess, but yeah, the flooding is an interesting one.
To answer Rockstar's question, do we still need NATO? I don't know if we need NATO. NATO needs us.
Well said.
And, over in Finland, when I go over there, everybody's excited about being a part of NATO, obviously, since they're the closest to the Russians. And I just laugh at them because I'm like, you honestly think we're coming? Did you not see what happened 2 years ago in Afghanistan?
Yeah, I don't know. I got mixed feelings about this. Like, we should absolutely have allies, right? Like, you don't want to become a recluse and fucking, because that never ends well.
Right.
That's how we get, well, world wars spawn from allies too, but you don't want to be standing alone.
No, I agree. We should have allies, and overall, NATO does more good than bad, because if you go back to one of our earliest streams when we had Doc on board, where he was on his NATO rant, and I'm like, say what you want about NATO. NATO seems to scare the shit out of Vlad, so that's a good reason to maintain it right there.
Well, that's exactly right. Like, the Russians have invaded Georgia, Ukraine, like non-NATO countries. So obviously NATO means something to Russia. So
yeah.
And then NATO through varying degrees of effort, did assist in Afghanistan. So we were attacked and they did follow us. Now, how much
that is true.
How much of their commitment actually was put into it? That's debatable. But there was a NATO presence. It was a NATO mission.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like when Trump started complaining about them not paying the share. That's true. They haven't. The Germans especially have let themselves atrophy. The French have seemed to only maintain their forces because the nature of their still far-flung empire required them to do it. The British are a joke right now. I mean, there's not enough ships in the Royal Navy to recreate taking the Falklands. They have 2 aircraft carriers and enough planes to fill up half of one.
They were barely able to pull it off the first time.
Yeah,
I mean, when you think about it, it's a miracle they actually did it, because they barely made it the first time they had to do it.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And you look at recently, Finland coming into NATO doubled NATO's artillery.
Wow.
That one nation, pretty small nation of 5.5 million people, doubled NATO's artillery.
Yeah, I don't think NATO is pointless. It's just everyone's got to row together, right? So it's just like if somebody's not doing what they need to do, then it doesn't really work. It's not right, you know what I mean? But you can say that about a lot of things.
Yeah, and you look at some of these nations, and you can tell they're not pulling their weight. Like you take one of the smaller nations, like Slovenia, for example. Okay, they're going to be limited what they can do. They have a fighter squadron. What tanks they had, they sold to the Ukrainians, so they don't have any tanks. They don't have a navy to speak of. Their army is small, and that's nothing against Slovenia, but they're not contributing much. You know, Iceland's a NATO member, and really all they contribute is land for us to have an air base that we don't even use anymore.
Sure, yeah.
No, they don't have Avro Vulcans anymore, but the Vulcan was never all that awesome anyways. Its bombing computer was the exact same one that was in the Lancaster bomber in World War II.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
Which is, by the way, if you want to laugh your ass off but watch a very cool documentary, go to YouTube and look up The Most Daring Raid, and it tells all about the Vulcan bombings down to the Falklands. And it literally is a skit by Monty Python. It is the most hilarious thing of what they did to get these bombers that were 3 months away from decommissioning to be able to make those flights. It's hilarious. I mean, they're doing stuff like one guy gets his dad, who flew conventional bombing missions during World War II, because they'd never dropped a bomb. It was all theoretical nuclear for them. Or like mid-air refueling, where they're like, we can do that, right? And you're like, oh no, we stopped doing that 10 years ago. It's incredibly dangerous. We don't want to do that.
Shit.
And when they go to get refueling probes, they're flying over to a museum in San Diego to get it. They don't have any maps, so they literally take a map of the North Atlantic, turn it upside down, and draw the islands on it. And like, you know, they don't trust the computer in the plane that's literally run by pulleys and bicycle chains. So they go down to the local market and buy a calculator for £5. It's absolutely hilarious. You will die laughing watching this.
What's that documentary called? That's what I'm doing as soon as I get off of here.
It's called The Most Daring Raid.
The Most Daring Raid.
It's like literally crazy. I'm like, how any of those guys survived it is just utterly amazing.
That is pretty wild.
The Brits did some hooking and jabbing in Afghanistan. So,
oh yeah,
it's funny. Tom from the Prepared Pathfinder actually got his hat right here, but he was one of the contestants on the SEER Challenge, this season's upcoming SEER Challenge, and he was a good dude, man. But he had served in Afghanistan.
The Brits are pretty cool because, you know, they and the Canadians have this weird thing, is like they don't have money for equipment and all that, so they'll just go out and train. So they're actually, their field craft, their soldiering skills are actually very good, but like everything else just sucks because they don't have anything.
Well, plus, I mean, their country, so the weather conditions are just atrocious. So it's like, you're gonna get some hard motherfuckers.
I've always dug that, like the English, very belt kit centric. In terms of kit, you know what I mean. Even in Iraq, when they were wearing armor, but they never got rid of that belt kit. You know what I mean.
So, and me, like if I could change shit, I would be that. I would go to that because that's how it was when I was a young Marine. Like we had our load bearing vest that went over our interceptor vest. Yeah. And it's like when if you needed to dig a fighting position, okay, let's say you even had to be in flat Kevlar, we could take your LBV off, set it next to your fucking where you're digging your fighting position, and you dig your fighting position without your combat load on. You just had your flat Kevlar on, or vice versa, right? So, and there was times, we conducted missions. There was one mission in 2003. It's funny we're talking about this because Stoker-Matic just put up a video like a collab we did up there at the end of the SEER challenge, and we were talking about this like very thing, right? And I started talking about that, like wearing LBVs over, or just load bearing equipment in general, over your body armor, right? So that you could have that, versatility of only wearing your load bearing equipment. And I remember there were some comments over there about like, I can't believe these former veterans would talk like this. You can't leave the wire without your body. I fucking did it. What are you talking about, dude? I went on LPOP missions with just load bearing equipment and a boonie. Like it was an LPOP. Like you're not trying to get in a tick in a fucking LPOP. We were observing a highway where the insurgents were shooting RPGs at passing coalition forces convoys. Like we were hiding in bushes in a hide. Like we did not need a flak and Kevlar for that mission. You weren't trying to get into a fight. You were trying to be stealthy. So it's like, people have gotten into this mindset that it's like you have to wear your body armor at all times. It's verboten to even suggest otherwise. But they can't get in their heads that there are missions, there are environments where that stuff is not practical. If you're going up in the mountains of Afghanistan on a recon mission, think lone survivor, 4-man recon team. Like your mission is to be stealthy. Your mission is to get up there. You wear your body armor up in those mountains, trying to do that mission, dude. You might have a heat casualty, somebody go down, and then your mission is a fucking automatic failure. You didn't even make the objective.
I can't remember. I can't remember what engagement it was. It was towards the end. It was towards the end of the war, maybe 3-4 years ago. But there was a troops in contact, and they were up on the mountain. They all were heat cashing out because they were in body armor and they had all this shit. You know what I mean? And there were, so there was, and a lot of equipment got done. And apparently they all got, they got flown off the mountain, but they had to leave all their shit behind. So it was, it was a big disaster. I'm trying to think of what it was, but it goes to the point where you're in the mountains. It's maybe not conducive for body armor.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not talking. There's absolutely a time and a place and a need for body armor. Absolutely, 100%, not questioning it, whatever. I'm just trying to say that there is a need sometimes to not have body armor, and that's why I like the concept of having load bearing equipment. And like the Brits, in my opinion, they were doing it right. I think they jumped on the fucking American dick way of attaching everything to your flak vest. But
that Osprey system they used is awesome. That vest that'll go over your armor. Yeah, that is a fucking great vest system. And by the way, there's plenty of them out there really cheap, and you get a shitload of pouches with them. I mean, if you don't have one right now, grab one, even if it's in desert DPM, because dye is a wonderful thing.
Which vest is this?
It's called the Osprey.
Oh, the Osprey vest. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
I mean, it is great. The one I got from Varus Lake, I got 13 pouches with it, and I spent like $52 including shipping. And the dye job on it is great. And it is like completely 100% versatile.
Yeah. I've seen that.
Well, the closest thing we have to that is kind of like the Flick. I mean, essentially.
Yeah, the Flick is awesome too. Yeah. Vastly underrated piece of gear.
$15. It's pretty. I picked up a Flick in Coyote Brown for $15. I'm like, I have single pouches. I have single pouches that cost 4 times as much as this whole LBE setup.
Yeah. That's what I had in OIF1 and OIF2. You're talking about the vest, right? It has no padding on the shoulders.
Yeah, FLC,
yeah. It was it's got no padding on the shoulders. It's just real wide. Mm-hmm. So it was great, man. It went over to your flak, and that's how most of us wore our shit. And then after as the years went on and the IED threat was so prevalent, like it, the bureaucracy steps in. It's like, you will not leave the wire without wearing your, flak and Kevlar, your body armor, blah, 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 blah. You got to be a fucking turtle. So
when you did that LPOP where you went out slick like that, was from command, was that all cool, or was that just something you did on your own?
No, that was a company devised mission.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
it wasn't like you were like fuck it, I don't need it. They were told you don't need it.
Hold on, I'll drive. I gotta draw a picture real quick. Sorry, I know everybody's waiting on me intently. So this is like a highway, right? And these are overpasses. So we got inserted in the middle of the night, 7-ton. Well, a convoy went. We were in the back of 7-ton, and we jumped off the back of 7-ton, and it was 2 Marines per LPOP, and we were staggered. I can't remember how much distance there was in between each. It might have been like 100 meters to this one, and 100 meters to that one, and then like 200 meters in between. But it was 2-man LPOPs. We fucking loaded heavy on ammunition, frags. We took a 5-gallon water can, and we had night vision, fucking thermal. It was for us. It was 2 machine gunners. So like we had our PAS 13 thermal scope with us, and we stayed in that for 24 hours, and then fucking 7-ton convoy rolled up in the middle of the night. We got back on the vehicle and rolled back out. But our job was to observe these overpasses for that 24-hour period, because the insurgents were going up on the overpasses and shooting. And it's like, if you saw the enemy, you were to call it in. Like we were heavy on ammunition and everything else in case we were compromised, we had to fight our way out. But like the idea was you observe, you report the enemy, and then, your react force reacts to that. So like you don't need a fucking flak Kevlar for that. The idea is to stay concealed, and being all tactical turtle in a hide isn't exact. A sniper doesn't wear a flak and Kevlar in his fucking ghillie suit when he's on his mission. Yeah. So it's like, I don't understand how people can sit here and go, oh yeah, a sniper doesn't need a flak Kevlar, and not associate that at all with an infantryman's job, and admit that there are missions and there are certain times where, having body armor is a detriment.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like Met TC applies. Weird.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the funny thing is, in that conversation we were having, Stoker brought up that, like, sometimes Met TC is overused, and it's kind of a cop out, because like somebody that doesn't know the answer to a question will say, "Oh yeah, Met TC dependent," and that's true. But it does. He's not trying to say that Met TC isn't a thing. It's just, some people use it as a cop out when they don't know the answer.
Yeah, but with so many things in life, it just depends. I remember over in Desert Storm when we ran convoys as we were moving our fob up for the helos and stuff, all that maintenance equipment had to go on the ground because the helos were mission tasked. Just throwing my flak on with an ammo pouch and my M9 because I had to drive a vehicle. That was the right answer. I couldn't have done that wearing my 782 gear. But the guy in the back of the truck providing security, no problem him being armored up with all his 782 gear, Kevlar, and everything else.
Yeah. I'm going to answer this question real quick. So he says, am I sold on the almighty HK416/M27? So my experience with the M27 is limited. When I started getting issued it, I left that rifle company a year later. So I only got to carry one for about a year and shoot it for about a year. And even then I was acting as a first sergeant. So it's like my experience using it was, just a little fam fire, essentially familiarization fire. So it is a accurate rifle. It is much heavier than an M16. I'll tell you that straight up. And now when I had it, it had an ACOG. Now they have low power variable optics on them. Now infantrymen are equipped with suppressors for their M27s. And that fucking rifle is like way longer than M16 A4 could ever hope to be. So I think back to the day of dudes bitching about the length of M16s, right? And now I see these M27s and how long they are with the M27 with the suppressor, and the weight of having, your PEC, your fucking LPVO and suppressor. like, and it was already a heavy rifle to begin with. it's it's a lot. So I don't know. It's a great rifle. It's a great rifle, but it's heavier and longer with the suppressor than an M16. So, you know, that's all I'll say. You got anything, Les?
No, I've got no time on the M27. I've held a 416 once, and it felt like holding a brick. It's more closer to a saw in weight than it is an M16.
I've held and fired a 416 also, and it was heavier than my Daniel Defense M4 V5 that is like my go-to, right? And my Daniel Defense M4 V5 has a quad rail, right? So that little shorty freaking 416 was heavier than my rifle. So it's German. It's over-engineered. It feels like it, you know. It is what it is.
Yeah, and like I mean, it's not a bad rifle, but is the weight worth it? Is the question, and I think only time was going to answer that question.
Yeah.
But it's lighter than that monstrosity they want to replace it with, the M5.
Well, so I haven't heard any talk about the Marine Corps adopting that. So I think that's a uniquely.
I was talking with a guy recently working down here at Quantico in that division that would make that decision.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's going to happen sometime in the future. Which,
really?
God help you, poor guys. Yeah. Never have I been so anti-weapon after getting to fire one. The only thing I will say to it for firing a full power rifle cartridge, that yes, at 50 meters, no problem whatsoever, mag dumping it onto a silhouette sized target. Super easy to control. Probably going to make a great DMR. The thought of patrolling with that thing every day just gives me nightmares.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that'll go the way of M14? Everyone will get them?
Yeah, I think it's going to be M14-like very quickly.
No.
Actually, more the way of the Pedersen rifle that was supposed to be adopted prior to the M1 Garand, because we were going to switch calibers and all that. And the military at the time just went, no, we got a lot of 30-06 and it's cheap, so we'll stick with it. I think switching to the caliber and with the wear and tear they're already admitting it's going to put on the gun, I think it's going to see very limited issue.
Yeah. It's a lot of it's an expensive exercise.
I just kind of feel like this is, kind of like the FBI. The FBI going to the 40 caliber pistol, and then
right
like
after 10 mil, yeah.
And then all the law enforcement agencies follow suit, right? And then what do? They revert back to 9mm, and now all law enforcement agencies. I feel like that's where we're at, right? So it's like the Army's adopting this larger caliber weapon, and everybody's gonna follow suit, and then it's gonna get to the point where it's like, oh well, now our smaller stature, soldiers and Marines and can't handle this as well. So they can handle the 5.56 better. So let's design a new service rifle on a 5.56, but with improved 5.56 ammunition. And then we go circle back to, because firearms, man, they really haven't changed.
And they're not going to for a long time.
Yeah, well, you guys know what I'm trying to say. Like firearm technology, right? Obviously, the firearms have changed over the years, but like firearm technology really hasn't changed all that much, right? We still have direct impingement and piston driven and stuff like that. Like those are really the big powerhouses since fucking World War II, really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was going to say most of the advancements come in it's ammunition advancement, really.
Yeah, ammunition advancement. Absolutely. Yeah, that's been the big driving force. But you look at some of the small arms, like some of these piston-driven ARs. Like, what's new? It's like fucking AKs and FALs. Essentially.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think in the next 50 years, all the improvements are going to be on what you can bolt to it. and then that'll be all linked to miniaturization. So whatever follows, like the VCOG, I think the Marine Corps adopted the VCOG or whatever it is, whatever follows that will be as capable, probably smaller and lighter. Your PEC will probably get down to being something very, very small in the rifle, not the big clunky box it is right now.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's what's going on, right? So like right now we're at we went from the M16A2 and then you went to the M16A4, but then everybody was starting to get equipped with, PECs and optics. So it made that weapon much heavier. And then everybody wanted an M4 so that you had a lighter weapon. And I feel like that we're at that stage where we're getting to the M16A4 level with all the shit on it, right? And it's going to be too heavy. And now everybody's going to want a lighter weapon. So it's like that bell curve is going to come back down, just like you were saying.
Yeah. I bet you we will go from M5 to M5A1 very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, shit. We're at the 2-hour mark, guys. So, I guess we'll just go around the horn, John. You ready?
I'm ready. I got nothing. Thanks. It's been great. I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Wow, that was quick. Thanks for all the prep time there, John.
Yeah. See what I did.
Yeah. Well, tune into my channel and stuff. Putting up gear reviews all the time. Have another one coming out this Friday. And also as we go into the new year, I'll be doing coverage of all the different matches that I normally go to. Hopefully getting to go some good training, travel overseas, do some matches over there, and bring all that goodness to everybody.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody tuning on tonight. We kind of shot from the hip tonight, but I think we may do. I've got a lot of projects coming down the pipe, guys. I've filmed a lot of video. It's just a matter of sitting down and putting it to fruition into an actual project. So you guys can expect a lot of stuff coming down the pipe. So I don't want to make any promises, but Bruce and I are talking about a Korean War gear video. It's something that's been on our radar for at least 2 years now. And I think we're finally coming to the final stages of actually making that actually happen. So I don't know, man. I don't know.
This is Bruce of who you speak.
He's there. He exists.
I need proof of life at this point.
I know, right? I actually talked to him on the phone today, but it was before we talked about doing the live stream. So I didn't mention anything about the live stream, but
it's Monday. He should know.
Well, I know,
if
but
in fact he's still alive and you were talking to the real Bruce.
I can confirm I was talking to the real Bruce. I know for a fact. You just can't mimic that Georgian accent. So, all right, guys. Any saved rounds? John, thanks for jumping on tonight, man.
Yeah, man. I had fun.
It was cool. It was cool to hear your maritime intel brief. So
thank you.
And then Les, you're just a given, man. I know you're going to be here.
I always got your six, brother.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you. All right, guys. Have a good night.
See you, everybody.